This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Episode 698, my friends, 2 from the Big 700. And we're going to keep going with this show because it's so much fun and everybody's listening. 100 countries. That's always nice to hear. Now, today we want to talk about how do you actually cater to your audience? I mean, the stories I have heard. Who is your audience? And they say, this is who it is. And I said, how do you know that? And they said, Christoph, I've been doing this for a long time. I know. Is that like the version when your parents say, because I said so? I think so. But what's the actual way to do it? Isabelle Landreville is going to be on the show today. She is the president and chief insight seeker over at Sylvestre Company. You can check them out at sylvestreco.com. And I'm really interested to find out what's her way to know who your audience is. And does that actually work? Does anybody ever just know? Do you just know? We'll find out. Isabelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christoph. I do think some people just know, though. Some people are super intuitive and just know. I don't think I would completely write them off.
It's, I think, we live in the grays, right? But it's much easier just to go very black and white. So, yeah. But I've heard it so many times that I don't know. Before you get to that answer, though, Washington Commanders colors for you as well, or no?
I think burgundy is my color. It's the color of the company. I think this is a fluke. Probably the great minds are sort of speaking together today. And so that's why we aligned. We are friends, but I don't think we've actually ever matched on screen before, which I think is really funny.
I think it's great. But so let's find out. How do you know? How do you figure out who your audience is if you don't have that intuition? Where do you even start?
Yeah, well, I think so. Coming from a qualitative researcher's background and someone who my go-to skill and my go-to and how I started in this business probably 25 years ago is doing ethnography. And so there is something about, as I would say, letting go of your desk, letting go of the data, and actually getting dirty, getting out there into the world. I think you need empathy to be able to build empathy. And there's nothing like trying it. There's nothing like doing it, whether it be what you're selling, what you're eating, the experience you're providing, or that of your competitors. There is something about always making sure that you're really knee deep and you're not disconnected. Walmart is what it is. And, you can have a whole bunch of different opinions on it, but there was something about, at one point, there was a big case study in my field. And when I was training to do what I was doing, which the CEO back in the day was sort of put on a pedestal because none of his executives could actually live off their salaries. They had to be connected to their core audience. They have to drive the same kind of car, sort of have the same reality, because it's easy to actually get disconnected. It's easy to talk to yourself. There's something, if you're a brand director or brand manager, if you're doing R&D, there is something about the next new thing. There's something fabulous about living and breathing it 24/7. It becomes your baby. It becomes everything. And then things can snowball. Like, I remember being in research and it was the craze of like health benefits and antioxidants and researching how gum could, through an antioxidant active ingredient, be a source of vitamin or something. And it just took one person in one group to go, you want me to get vitamins and a benefit from something I don't swallow? And the entire project completely unraveled and shifted in that very moment. So you do sometimes, because you're enthusiastic, because you're living and breathing it, because it is your baby, you do lose perspective. And I think it's about stepping away and not only looking at the data and charts and numbers and all of that, but actually going back to real life, going back to what is this experience? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? Sort of having that participant observation kind of naive curiosity, and sort of letting your five senses actually help you get a sense of it. And I think if you actually do that, then there's nothing like taking it a step further, either through participant observation or direct observation, to really understand what makes your people serve and the people you're supposed to cater to and love and want their best in the world. And, you get up in the morning to make them better. And what what makes them tick and what makes them come back to you and so forth.
It's just, so when you were talking, so I'm thinking there's also this other aspect of like how it makes people feel, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about the Commanders, right? They used to be the Redskins, then they became the Washington football team, and Jason Wright took over as president. And all of a sudden, I'm pretty loud on social media. I know it's a surprise, but don't be too surprised. But so somebody reached out from the football team and says, "Hello, would you be interested in talking to Jason Wright, on a phone call for 30 minutes?" I was like, "Really? Is this a scam or something? Do I have to send $100 before we do that?" And they said, "It's not a scam. Like, we'll email you from the correct email and whatever." And so I had a 30-minute phone call with the president of my childhood football team that I still follow today. And his question was, "How do you like the name? What do you think we should do?"
Yeah.
I've told that story so many times. Like that, even if he leaves that club, like I will be connected just because of that story. So there's also the aspect of, when you ask people, and actually I'm not sure they did what I recommended, what my opinion was, or maybe they didn't. So it didn't even matter. What mattered is that I was talking to him. So he came out and he basically got dirty.
Yeah. And I think it's in the details. It doesn't have to be, to your point, I love your story. It doesn't have to be a hugely orchestrated thing. It could be a tiny thing. And people don't quite remember. See, I think your story is just perfect because you can't even remember quite pinpoint in detail what unfolded and what happened. You probably don't clearly sort of remember the words they used throughout the conversation, but you do vividly remember how it made you feel and what the intent was. So this notion of just showing up in very small ways, even without saying anything, so reaching out and getting dirty it's not marketing. It's not about getting your message out there. It's about showing up and listening and watching and observing. I think there's a lot of things I can't share just because of the amount of NDAs I sign on a daily and weekly basis. But I think Malcolm Gladwell in one of his books actually had the perfect example. The example was Heinz Ketchup. The CEO just invited himself over for dinner, typical family, and he was just sitting there at the table, just watching dinner unfold and basically not saying anything, not asking anything. And the only thing he noticed is that the Heinz ketchup bottle was in a glass bottle. It has that signature fabulous experience, which is either a love or hate kind of aspect, and everybody has their method. But then it was interesting how his core target, the poor 6 or 7-year-old or 5-year-old across the table, the youngest of the family, was served first as the youngest in the family, but was unable to actually access the Heinz ketchup bottle. So in that very moment, he understood who was buying the product, but that his core person, the person he needed to get up in the morning to please and serve, couldn't get parental permission to actually use his product because it wasn't in a plastic squeeze bottle. So it wasn't safe for him to actually reach out to and serve himself. And he couldn't just readily, use the product. So I think just showing up and getting dirty is also that. You don't need that much. And I think sometimes it is about thinking outside of the box, thinking outside of it, and it's in the details. I think there was something fabulous that I heard on, I think it was Simon Sinek's podcast, but I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I discovered it a few years ago when I lived in New York for a while, and it's called Milk Bar. So this is, if you haven't tried it, you need to try this. So it's basically ice cream that is made out of cornflake milk. So let just that sit for a minute. So it has that perfect sweet and kind of salty taste because they like sip the cornflakes into the ice cream and then make soft serve ice cream out of it. And it was really interesting how the chef actually who came up with the idea was doing a taster menu. And she said, I'm competing with all these other chefs, and I'm really competing with people wanting to get up and go to bed. Like they've had 6 courses, they're done. Are they really hungry? It's not about hunger. It's about like, what do they want to do? And she was like, I was competing with their pajamas, with their bed, with going out and having fun, with just leaving the table. And she said, well, you know what? What's the next thing that's going to get them sort of ease them into that? And she said something that's really warm and fuzzy and nostalgic and emotionally, and what is okay and what do I love to eat as a nightcap at that time when I'm kind of done with my day. She was like cereal in my PJs in my bed. And that's where the idea came from. So sometimes it's casting a wider net and sort of thinking about things from a different perspective as well, outside of your kind of the focus of what you're doing.
I mean, that's kind of how new products are born, right? They figure out where can it fit in. It's just so interesting, how everything competes with everything, right? I mean, sometimes I talk to a SaaS company or something, and they're like, well, these are our competitors. And I said, you know what? I considered you to subscribe to your product, and you know who all your competitors were? All those people. And then also the Washington Commanders Twitter feed, because like I was looking at your website and then now they popped up with some news or some funny clip or something. And guess what? I wanted to watch that. So it's like, you have to draw me in. You have to get me to pay attention. And then, certainly you have to build that community. Now, once you talk to people, I mean, I'm a big fan. Like maybe I should just start every show like this, honestly, and just go, tell me about this. Like, what do you want to talk about? Like, what should we know? Mm-hmm. And you can probably get a good answer to that. And I think Jason actually asked me something like that at the end. He said, like, maybe 10 minutes to go. So this is the key, in my opinion. 10 minutes, not 5 minutes after we're supposed to be done already. But there was actually time. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, I have 10 more minutes and I can't say anything. It's like mind blowing. But like, what questions do you ask, and how do you ask questions? I mean, I'm not going to say who I saw doing this the other day, but it was somebody a local thing I help, and they send out a thing and they said, would you pay to use this kind of facility? And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
Or maybe I would say yes, and then they build it, and then nobody will pay. Maybe that's the example. So how do you go about getting people to give you the answers that are actually helpful?
I think you have to, cast a wider net. I think you do have to sort of understand. You have to make it human. I think insights are now human insights these days, which could be an entire other conversation. And you and I have talked about that before, but it is about talking about the people. They're not just consumers. They're not just people that are there to share an opinion. They do have values. They are people. It's trying to get to know them and making them feel heard. There's nothing like starting a conversation with, hey, how's it going? How was your day? Like, just start, like, build rapport, get to know the person. There's something about giving you license to then go deeper as you're probing. Don't go right off the bat into the category, into kind of your product, into what you really want to know. Make it human first. Make it about two people trying to get on, sort of understand one another and get to know one another. So I really like asking, like, how was your day? What's going on? How do you feel about that? And then sort of going deeper into the conversation to really understand, well, is that typical? And has that happened to you before? And trying to step back and sort of understand so much more the human above and beyond the potential consumer or target audience, as we clinically kind of like to refer to them. For people, I think, get to know people so that you understand what makes them tick, and so you can actually build rapport and fall in love with them. Because if you've got to wake up every morning to make them happy, you got to love them and respect them.
You got to love them. And true love happens when you get dirty. I'm
Well,
beating that one to death, Isabel.
it's no, but I think it's really interesting because there was this massive quant segmentation one day. And this brand manager came to me, and I had the privilege of working with the company and with her for a while. And she's like, so my brand was associated to this segment. And apparently, and this was a few years back, so I can talk about it. And she was like, apparently the number one website that she goes to is Canada 411, which is basically, the white pages, which are dead in the waters. And then she has a whole bunch of cats. And then she likes like this and blah, blah, blah. And this amazingly sort of trendy, innovative at this like head of her career sort of brand manager looked at me and said, this can't be real. Tell me this isn't true. And so it was really interesting. She's like, I don't get it. I don't get this person. I don't understand this person. I can't connect with this person. She seems so boring to me. How can I create things that I'm proud of that as a marketer makes sense, but that, will be successful? And so we said, well, how about we go and meet them? And it was really interesting to see that there were so many layers to this person. And yes, she skewed female and loved cats, and she could never remember anybody's phone number because she remembered names over phone numbers and emotions over content. So as we unpacked the different layers, it was really interesting at the end of the day in the entire sort of getting dirty kind of shared learning journey. The brand manager came back and said, you know what, they're pretty awesome. Actually, I do feel like I know them better, and I feel like I can do stuff that's going to make them really happy and really forge that sticky relationship between them, my brand, and sort of me. So she fell in love with them and started respecting them because initially, oh man, she did not want this target. Poor her. I really felt for her.
Like as you're talking, I'm thinking, I mean, it's like, if you have to get dirty, right? Sometimes you have to kind of move the dirt around, find different things. I mean, maybe that's, you have to ask follow-up questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite ones really is, what do you mean by that? Or like, is that what it means? Or just kind of play it back. I have seen, I mean, we did a whole show actually on what do you do if somebody is committed to misunderstanding you or something like that. And it was maybe like a little harsh, quite frankly. But the examples those ladies gave on the show on like misunderstandings, crazy, right? I mean, it's like it happens all the time. Somebody like makes a sound or they, whatever, like their facial expressions might not align with, how your facial expressions would be. And you kind of have to dig in. But to ask follow-up questions, I mean, first of all, you have to listen, and then you have to figure out what does it have to do with anything. I mean, in my opinion, but what's the importance of how, or what's the importance? I think we're going to agree on that. But how do you dig deeper at the right time? Like, and how do you decide what to dig deeper on? I mean, you just talked, and we could have gone down 10 different roads, right? Like, but I know how I choose, but what's your recommendation on how people figure that out?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I strongly believe that any question can be asked of whomever. It just depends on how and when. So there is a timing aspect. You do have to earn the right. There is a lot of trust in all of it. The human insight is that people love talking about themselves. And people remember how they feel in your presence. They don't really necessarily remember what was said or how you got them there. Which I think gives us a lot of license. And so I do think there's something about earning the right, building trust, creating a safe space, making the person feel completely normal, completely validated, without skewing results, of course. But if the person feels very important and heard and understood and safe in your presence, then it's a safe space, right? So a safe space means, hey, just like any best bud, we can literally, so there's ways of getting people in the right frame of mind in the right space over time. It doesn't take a lot of time. Sometimes you can do it in 10 minutes. So it is about connecting in a more meaningful place by creating a sort of a trusting bond without revealing anything about yourself, which is kind of the important piece of it. And I think the other thing too is that in my line of work, I'm not chasing and fulfilling my own curiosity. I have a mandate. There's a beginning and an end to the entire thing. There is an outcome. There is a key deliverable. There is a purpose. And I always reverse engineer everything. So yes, there's timing, there's how you do it, but then there's also, you know what? Don't bark up that tree if it's not on scope. There is something about let's open that door and tell me more about that. What do you mean about that? Can you show me? Like those are probes that I really, and how did that make you feel? And where does that come from? Never asking really why, because someone will actually, it could break the trust bond. Someone could get defensive. It's not about them sort of justifying their behavior. It's about you sort of understanding kind of deeper, sort of the deeper reasons for them to do it without having them question what they're doing. So show me, tell me more. How did that make you feel? When is the first time you kind of realized you were doing this? Sort of trying to go back and tie it back to maybe a life event or something is really interesting. But never questioning it so that they don't get defensive. And then never losing sight of your purpose and your client and your mandate. God forbid you ask a question that will take you down a rabbit hole and make your client lose valuable time. That will just easily derail a product, up an entire project.
I think, I mean, certainly I share stories on here too, and I'm talking, right? But this is completely data driven, Isabelle. You roughly get 70% of the time, and I get 30% of the time, and like totally data driven. Yeah. I ran it through Otter, and it told me who gets how much time, and every episode is roughly the same. But it's like you have to build a relationship, and really, really quickly. I mean, you and I know each other, but like there's a lot of guests that come on here. I've never met them. It's the first time we met them. We got 24 minutes. I also think the 24-minute thing has really helped, for me at least. I mean, that's because of DBTV, but like it really forces us to like, yes, share a story, tell a story, but get to the point, right? Because we only got 24 minutes. And once we get there, we're going to be done roughly, right? Because otherwise the TV people won't be happy. People still watch TV. Go ahead.
I think there's also how you set it up, though. So you set it up, you create an expectation, you sort of say what your role is, what my role will be, the fist bump thing, that. I know exactly what my role is. I know what is expected of me. I know how, in my mind, how to exceed expectations. I'm big on sort of wooing people and exceed expectations. So because you gave yourself a clear role, you gave me a clear role, how we were going to interact, how was the 24-minute kind of going to be structured? Because of that, I kind of was okay and said, you know what? I'm buying the ticket for this. I'm getting on the train. I'm going to follow you. I'm in my wagon. I'm good. I have faith because I know what to expect. I think that's huge. And I think as a moderator, we always say nothing beats a good intro. That is where you literally give yourself license and permission to do what you need to do. And you clearly tell them sort of what is expected of them and how to succeed. Because everybody goes into that room or signs up for research with the best of intentions. They just want to share. They just want to actually help you out. So why not sort of give them that faith? So I think it's also the setup.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And well, definitely you exceeded expectations in my book, episode 698, almost at the end here. 30 seconds. Who should reach out to Sylvestre and company? What's the perfect client? Who can you help the most?
Okay, well, Sylvestre Co, reach out on the website. You can look me up on LinkedIn. But if you want to get up close and personal with your folks, reach out. It is all about that.
Reach out. Nice to see you, and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show